Welcome to the Wrestling with Success podcast. In this show, you'll learn how to use lessons used in sports so you can use failure as your secret weapon for success and succeed in the real world. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, husband, father, adventure seeker, and entrepreneur, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Success. Today I bring you Tom Rowland. Tom is a fisherman by trade. He's developed a vast media empire from scratch. He started and hosted multiple outdoor television shows, including one on ESPN, another on NBC Sports, and another on the Sportsman's Channel. He started as a fishing guide in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, and he continued as a guide in Key West, Florida, with no prior experience, and eventually won the ESPN Great Outdoor Games. He's also a successful CrossFit athlete and completed Sealfit Kokoro, developed by Navy SEAL Mark Devine, who was my guest on episode number 45. Tom credits his background as a wrestler for his business and personal success. Now, if you don't have time to listen to this entire episode, or if you hear something that you like but you don't have time to write it down, be sure to grab your free copy of the action plan from this episode, as well as get access to action plans from every episode at jimharshawjr.com/action. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jim, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Yeah, well, thanks for coming on, man. You got your hands in a lot of different things.
Well, yeah, I definitely do, but managing to keep some balance in the life as well.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that too. Tell us how you got your start in wrestling first.
Well, I was kind of a smaller kid, like a lot of wrestlers, that kind of gravitate to the sport because maybe you're not big enough for football or whatever, but I was kind of small and kind of had a tough streak, I guess. And my parents just kind of took me to the gym one time and dropped me off to see if I liked it. And I did. I loved it. And I guess I started in about kindergarten and wrestled through my senior year in high school. I had some great coaches. I wrestled for a high school in Chattanooga, Tennessee called McCauley School with Gordon Connell as one of my coaches. And he turned out to be a real mentor in my life. But I have always identified myself as a wrestler, even today. And it's interesting. I was a wrestler, and then I was a wrestling coach for my kids and a wrestling parent. And between the three, being the wrestling parent was by far the most difficult for me.
Amen to that. I agree, man. I competed for 17 years since I was 6 years old on up, and gosh, I'm like you. I'm a youth wrestling coach now, and I'm a wrestling parent. Man, being a parent's the hardest part.
It's the toughest one. I really believe that it is.
And so, how did that lead into fishing? I mean, you got into your career as a fishing guide. How did that come about? Well,
I thought for a while I thought I was going to wrestle in college, and that just didn't really turn out to happen for me. And so I changed pretty much every plan and wasn't looking at schools I could wrestle at anymore, just looking at schools I could go to, and ended up going to the University of Alabama. And after the first year at Alabama, I got a job in Yellowstone National Park, and which was a complete departure for me. I had no experience out there. I'd never been to Yellowstone National Park. I'm not even sure how I got the idea to go there, but it sure was a good thing because when I got there, I just couldn't believe the things I was seeing. It really changed my life going there. And
why did you go out there? What made you look into going to Yellowstone?
There was a guy that came back to school, and I knew him before he went to Yellowstone, and when he came back, he was kind of different, and it intrigued me. And I asked him about what he had been doing that summer, and he told me he went to Yellowstone. He was hiking and camping and fishing and backpacking and everything. And I thought, man, that sounds pretty cool. So I looked into it, ended up getting a job out there, and a very humble job. I was a maid, just cleaning rooms. But the good thing about being a maid was that you had lots of free time. So I would have about 3 days a week where I could go backpacking or camping or, fishing. And I had never seen any of that country before. So I was my jaw was on the floor from the moment I got there to the moment I left. And I had a couple of experiences out there catching some fish where, it was from being from Tennessee, the water that I fished in was always muddy. It was always kind of dirty. I could never really see the fish. And I went to Yellowstone, and I was on the Yellowstone River and looked down, and it looked as though this fish was floating in the air. And I had never, it really was kind of a visual. It was kind of crazy because it just seemed like this fish was floating in the air. But what was going on is the water was so clear. I'd never seen water that clear, and the fish was just swimming there. I ended up catching that fish. And at that moment, I just said, I don't care what I have to do. I don't care what, I have to go through or live, what kind of conditions I need to live in to be able to do this for the rest of my life. But this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I can remember it like lightning struck, like that's it. And so from then on to today, I've been kind of chasing that moment and that dream, of being able to be in the outdoors and see cool things like that pretty much for the rest of my life. I've been very fortunate to have seen a lot of cool things just like that. So after that summer, I went back to school, and then I started looking into how I could get a fishing guide job. And my dad sent me this little clipping out of a newspaper that said, it was like for a guide school. And it was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And he asked me if I thought I might like to go to that. And I did. So I went there, and I did well in the school without any experience. I was definitely the greenest one there. I had no idea what I was doing, but I just really wanted to do it. A lot of enthusiasm. And the guy that ran the school, he saw that, I guess, and he hired me. His name was Joe Bressler, and he gave me a chance. And so I worked for him that summer and continued to work for him for 7 summers after that. And so that's how I got my start in the fishing. And somewhere along the line, I completed college, and then decided I wanted to fish year round. And there wasn't a lot of year round fishing in Jackson, Wyoming. It gets pretty cold about November. So I migrated down towards Key West. And for a little while, I was being a fishing guide in Key West in the wintertime. And then I would go back out to Jackson, Wyoming in the summertime. It was a pretty good life, which I enjoyed. It was kind of a vagabond lifestyle, but I also had a young lady in my life. And when we decided we were going to get married, she asked one thing of me, which was to pick one of those 2 locations. Didn't matter to her which one, but she thought we needed to be in one location. So I could work almost all year round in Key West. So that's where we went. We went to Key West and ended up raising our families down there, or our family down there. And I have 3 children, and raised them all as a fishing guide.
Wow, that's pretty cool that you found that you had that lightning strike, that moment, where you said, this is what I want to do. And then you pursued that, right? You followed that dream and, as a guide, and then you got to a point where you actually started a TV show. I mean, how'd you make that leap? I mean, that's a pretty big leap. I mean, for me, for the listener, like we're sitting here going like, yeah, if I wanted to start a TV show, I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean, how do you go about that?
You know what? I didn't know where to start either. And, but I was a fishing guide, and as a single fishing guide working 150 days a year, you're doing great. You're making, $400 or $500 a day, and it's great. But as you start to develop a family, or you need to work more, and you need to continue to work more, and you have weather issues and all kinds of things that keep you from working every day that you might like to, or that you had scheduled. So you have to continue to work real hard. So I started thinking, well, maybe I could, do some things that would help me to get my name out there a little bit more. And there were these tournaments that you could participate in. And if you won those, you got your name written in magazines, or people would talk about you, and it would turn into more business. So I started fishing these tournaments, and I enjoyed the tournaments. It was competition, just like wrestling. It was, you had to prepare. There was a lot of preparation in getting ready to be in one of these kind of fishing tournaments, and ended up, because of that, doing pretty well in them. I was fortunate enough to be in the first ESPN Great Outdoor Games. And it was kind of funny because it was a trout fishing competition. But at that point, I was a full-on saltwater fishing guide, but I had a trout background. So I went to that competition and I ended up winning it. And it was a kind of an interesting storyline that a saltwater fishing guide could win this international trout fishing competition in freshwater. And I used that. I called a bunch of the fishing shows that were out there and invited them down and said, hey, look, I got a great story for you. Here's a saltwater guy that wins this trout fishing competition. Why don't you come down and fish with me? We'll do a show. And so they did. Probably about 30 of them came down. Wow. Just about every show that was on TV thought it was a good story. And I was offering, an interesting location and so they came down. And so I was getting a lot of experience. I was seeing how other people were doing their shows, and there were a lot of different approaches. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, I kind of like this. It's kind of interesting and neat, but my job I'm a fishing guide. And the tournament world became more and more important for me. And about that time, ESPN and this other organization launched a redfish tournament. And it was a tournament that was kind of like the bass fishing tournaments that you see, where you travel around to these different locations and you fish for money. And there was one difference, and it was that it was a 2-man format. So I needed a partner, and I found this friend of mine in the Keys, and we partnered up on that redfish tournament and started traveling all around. And at this time, I had 2 babies really at home in diapers. I was leaving my wife to take care of them as I went to pursue these tournaments, and it was kind of fruitless. There wasn't a lot of money in it. We were doing well, but it was very challenging, very difficult time to be away from your kids and away from your family. And there was one situation where I was in Louisiana, in Venice, Louisiana, and my wife was in Key West, and Hurricane Charlie came over Key West, and I couldn't leave to go help her, and she could not leave to get out of there. So she just had to kind of hunker down with the babies and weather out the storm. And it was at that moment that I just said, I'm done with these tournaments. I don't want to ever be away from my family like that again. And my partner didn't have a family at that time, and he was kind of having a hard time understanding it. But if you've got a family and you get in that situation, you're done. I mean, I was completely done. So we drive home and start kind of thinking about how we could maintain some of the sponsorship that we had in the tournaments, but do something else, stay at home with our families. And, we kind of concepted this idea of a television show. We didn't really have any idea how to do it, but I had seen 30 people or 30 different shows, operate. So I kind of had a slight idea, just enough to be dangerous, just enough to make a lot of really big mistakes,
Just enough to think that you knew what you were doing.
Yeah. So, but fact is, we just did it. We went out, we filmed a pilot, and we got that pilot on TV, and then we went out and sold our sponsorship. And, it was one of those things where it was a burn the boat kind of moment where we just decided this is what we're doing. And, we're not going to be denied. So a lot of mistakes went into that, tons of mistakes. But the fact is that we just were so focused on making this thing happen that somehow we overcame all the stupid mistakes and obstacles that we had and ended up getting our first show on television. And that's been it's on the air for 13 years now.
Yeah.
And that one's called Saltwater Experience. Along the way, we started another one with a similar format, which is an offshore show, and that's called Into the Blue. And then we had success with that. We started a bass fishing show with a similar format called Sweetwater. And so all of those are currently airing. And
what networks do you find those on?
We're on NBC Sports. That's our biggest network.
Okay.
Sportsman's Channel and Sun Sports. Sun Sports is a Florida channel. Sportsman's Channel is a national channel, and NBC Sports is obviously a big national network. We were on ESPN a a long time ago before they discontinued their outdoor block. They had a thriving outdoor block there and then changed direction. So now we're on those 3 networks, and then, social media and everything's taken off. So that's become a really big direction in the sponsorship of the television shows, is also delivery on social media.
So if I'm Tom Rowland, everything worked out for me, right? That's what it sounds like for me, for the listener. We're listening to this, and you go to college and you get this cool job out west. Maybe being a maid's not the coolest job, but you have this cool experience out there, right? This life-changing experience, this lightning strike experience, and you know what you want to do for the rest of your life, no matter the conditions you said you had to live in. You knew what you wanted to do, and then you go off and you become a guide and you love your life and everything's going great, and then you go on these tournaments and you're winning, and then you win this other tournament, and you decide to start, you get on all these TV shows on 30 different shows, and you decide to start your own shows. And it sounds like you went through some bumps there. And now you've got multiple shows on these networks. I mean, it had to have been harder than that, right?
Right.
Tell us about
it. Sounds like everything just worked out exactly as I had planned. Right. But the funny thing is that everything worked out. And everything is always going to work out because, honestly, I know this is a wrestling podcast, but even if it wasn't a wrestling podcast, I would say the same thing. The things that I learned in wrestling, never to quit, never, no matter how discouraged you get, to push through and get back out there, all of those things apply to daily life. And it certainly applied in whatever success that I've had. But I can assure you that none of the original goals that I had set for any of this looked anything like they do today.
So I want to just emphasize that for a second. A lot of people are afraid to set goals because they think they're written in stone. And if they don't achieve those exact goals that they wrote down on paper, then that means they failed.
Right. And that's not true at all.
Exactly. That's not true. You write down the goals, you step forward, you start taking action, and the path might fork, the path might split, or in taking those actions, you're going to stumble into different opportunities. But having goals and moving towards them is the key to getting anywhere in life.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, my original goal was I wanted to be outdoors and be in the outdoor space for the rest of my life. Well, that's exactly what I've done, but it doesn't look anything like I thought it would at the very beginning. And I've had unbelievable amounts of failure, unbelievable amounts of disappointment and sacrifice to get to wherever it is that I am right now. And this is certainly not the end. I continue to set goals and continue to try new things and continue to mold and shape this course that I'm on. And, in Sealfit Kokoro, that was one of the things that we learned there was to not form a perfect plan, but to form a good enough plan to where it's good enough to get you started, and then you change your course along the way. I mean, you can change your course and you can stumble into lots of opportunities that are far better than what you started out on. And, that's what I see. I see a lot of people talking themselves out of great opportunities, and nobody else is talking them out of it. They're talking themselves out of it. Yeah. And it's because, they don't have enough experience, or they don't know the right people, or they don't have the right education, or they live in the wrong place. Well, all of those things were challenges that I faced. I mean, and still do. As a guide in Key West, I didn't grow up there. I didn't have a father or an uncle or a cousin or anybody that was a fishing guide. I had never been on a saltwater fishing charter before. I had no idea what I was doing. But actually, the funny thing is that when I look back on it now, the things that I thought were my greatest weaknesses have turned into my greatest strengths. And, in that situation, not knowing anything, not knowing anyone, I felt like, wow, I have a ton to learn. I have to learn so much. And so I put my head down and started working and started learning. And, a couple of years later, I look around and I'm kind of like, wow, I still have a tremendous amount to learn. Put my head down, keep working, keep learning, keep exploring, keep looking around, keep trying to pick up every little aspect of knowledge that I can from anyone. And, 12, 15 years later, you kind of peek your head up and go, wow, maybe I have learned something along the way. But, the guys that did know a lot, that grew up there, that already knew a bunch, they had this little milk route that they would take. And I think it's the same thing whether you're talking about fishing or whether you're talking about, in any profession, where if you feel like your strength is that, oh, my dad did this business, I have a blueprint for success, and you follow that blueprint and that's all you do, there's somebody else out there that's trying a million different things, that's practicing way harder. And one day you're going to meet them and they're going to beat you. So I think
how does one go about that? Okay. So we're in our jobs right now. We're in our lives. We're kind of going through the motions in a lot of ways. How do we think outside the box? Is it asking different questions? Is it getting other people in our lives that can kind of guide us or push us? I mean, how do we go about that?
I think there's no question that, certainly if anybody's listening to this podcast, they're already on the right path, right? Because they're looking for 1%. That's another thing we learned in Sealfit Kokoro. It's funny that, so many things about that Sealfit Kokoro I think about every single day. Something like that is important to get out of your comfort zone and realize, wow, there's a lot to learn. And, some things that you can learn at a place like that is to give your 100% every single time. And, I think a lot of people get very comfortable in their life, very comfortable in their daily routine, and somehow shaking that up, whether it's something like Sealfit Kokoro, whether it's something like getting a life coach or a personal, coach, or even just a group of friends that can hold you accountable to some of these goals and aspirations that you might have, and maybe you're afraid to tell other people. I mean, whether you just write them down on a piece of paper or you actually voice them out in public, I think that's hugely important, that you somehow let someone else know about the things that you want so that somebody can help you stay accountable to them. And, coaches are great. I've had plenty of coaches, and, finding something outside of that, whether it's Sealfit Kokoro, and not everybody might be in the physical condition to do Sealfit Kokoro, but they have a smaller program called 20X, which is only about 12 hours. And, most people could make it through that, and it's going to challenge you to your core, but you're going to learn things in a program like that you're going to take back to your daily life and make observations about what it is that you're doing that can be changed, or find out what it is exactly that you do want to do, and put you on a path to starting that, no matter what that is.
And so for the Sealfit Kokoro, and to learn more about Sealfit, you can check out episode 45 for the listener. Check out episode 45 where I interviewed Mark Devine, who is the founder of Sealfit. And man, he's got a lot of great programs, and he talks about some of those in that episode. Actually, Larry, and you mentioned the 20X. Larry Hagner, who's the founder of the Good Dad Project, I interviewed him in episode 46. Larry is training for the 20X program, nice, which is pretty cool. And just to reflect back on another thing he said, I keep referring to these different episodes, but episode 27, I interviewed Joe DeSena of the Spartan Races, and he talked about architecting a little bit of discomfort into your daily life. Architecting Absolutely. In a little bit of discomfort. And he said, if you do that, his quote is something like, if you do that every day, you'll be happy just eating a cracker in the rain, And we're all looking for happiness, right? We're all looking to get more out of our life and to find that next level and to find that next thing. And sometimes it's about, realizing what you actually do have. Eating a cracker in the rain, you could be happy doing that. If if you know what the alternative is. The alternative is a lot harder for a lot of people. And we live in this sort of soft world, I think. So, it's pretty cool that you forced yourself to do things like the Sealfit Kokoro, and you're really into CrossFit as well. Talk to us, me and the listener, about CrossFit, and tell the listener about what you were telling me about the gym that you have at your house.
Sure. CrossFit, I found CrossFit very early, and it came at a time in my life where, I was really focusing on running a lot, and I was in Key West, and really none of my friends in Key West were athletic or paying much attention to their body. We were all busy as fishing guides, and I started running marathons and stuff, and it's a very kind of lonely pursuit. And I had gotten my share of marathons, and I came across this thing online called CrossFit, and I was captivated by the whole idea of it, that they would post these workouts there, and with minimal equipment in my backyard, I could do exactly the same workout as a guy in Colorado or Afghanistan. And you would use the comments to post your time, and then people would start putting videos up and different things, and you would think you had done pretty well on this workout, and you would look and somebody had beaten you by 5 minutes. And, for me, it was a great opportunity to train virtually with other people because I didn't have anyone to train with. So everything I was doing was completely alone. And I thought that was a really cool concept. And it really reminded me of wrestling and wrestling practice. And a lot of the workouts looked like workouts we used to do when I was wrestling. And in my running, I had lost so much strength. I could barely do a pull-up. I was not, I could run a marathon in 3 hours and 13 minutes, but I couldn't do a lot of things, including my job very well, which was poling a boat, which is pushing a boat along with a long pole for 8 to 10 hours a day. And I was getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And so I really wanted to get better at my own job, and that required me to get stronger. And so CrossFit was perfect for that. And a few years ago, it's been 9 years now, I moved back to Tennessee. And when I did, I built a little garage gym and invited some people over. And this has spiraled completely out of control. And now I have about 30 to 40 people that come to my garage gym at 5 o'clock in the morning. And my wife is just a saint to allow us to drop heavy weights and do CrossFit in the driveway.
Is this every day?
It's 5 or 6 days a week.
Wow.
And then the CrossFit kind of, I got more interested in Sealfit and the whole 5 mountain approach, which includes mental and physical training and, emotional and spiritual, and the whole Kokoro spirit. And that kind of led me to do the Kokoro camp. And then
what is that? Can you tell us a little bit more about that Kokoro
camp?
The
Kokoro camp? Sure. So Mark Devine runs Sealfit, and you can find that online. And Sealfit is kind of an offshoot of CrossFit. They use a lot of CrossFit in Sealfit, but it is a much longer, much higher volume program than CrossFit. CrossFit a lot of times are 20-minute workouts or less, and Sealfit might take you an hour and a half to do an operator WOD. And so it's a lot of volume, high volume. It's designed to train special operations warriors, Navy SEALs, Rangers, people that need to be able to move a lot of stuff a long way. And I just found it very interesting because it also incorporates a mental aspect and an emotional aspect and a spiritual aspect. And then what Mark Devine calls the Kokoro spirit, which is basically your fighting spirit, which as a wrestler, you don't want to get pinned. You want to win. You're in the third period and you're dead even with the other guy, and the guy that wants it more is going to win. And that's kind of the Kokoro, or kind of what I think of as the Kokoro spirit, just your grit, your determination, your fighting spirit. And so in each one of these workouts, you're kind of training all of those aspects of your life. And I found that to be really, really interesting and just really enjoyed the approach. And so I thought, well, I think I'm going to go do this camp. And I had no idea what I was getting into. But I was smart enough to get a coach to help me. I got Brad McLeod, who's a former Navy SEAL and works with Mark. And he kind of helped look at my training and make sure that I was doing the right things in preparation and make sure that I was prepared for it. And they lay out some guidelines that are published. You have to run a mile and so fast and be able to do the Murph workout in such an amount of time and do so many push-ups and sit-ups.
Murph workout is a specific CrossFit workout for the listener.
Yes,
I can even post that. I'll post the Murph workout in the action plan for the listener.
Yeah, it's a fairly extensive workout, but again, you get to this camp and there's certainly you're going to be moving for 50 hours, no rest, no sleep, and you're going to have the opportunity to learn the tricks that the real Navy SEALs use to make it through a regular day. And the idea is that it's just a snapshot of a 48, 50-hour period in a Navy SEAL Hell Week. Certainly not the whole thing. It's a camp that's used to train people to get ready to go to BUD/S, or in my case, somebody who just wants to test their boundaries and see if they can handle it or what they can learn and take back into their regular life. And that's what it was for me. I learned a tremendous amount of lessons that I took back to my daily life and became a better parent, better husband, a better business partner, all because of the lessons that I learned.
Man, this is a good advertisement for Mark. I have to tell him about this.
Well, it really is. I mean, you can't fake it. I mean, it's an authentic endorsement for the camp, because I know probably 20 people that have been to Kokoro. I sent some people to Kokoro because of how much I enjoyed it. And all of them say the same thing that I know, is that they think about it in some way, shape, or form. They think about it just about every day. And if you do it right, you're going to learn a lot of lessons that will transfer directly into your everyday life. And I certainly did. I learned something that, I had no expectation of learning this. I thought I would learn many other lessons, but what I really came away from that camp is that if I want to be an extraordinary leader, I need to be an extraordinary follower. And that hit home hard for me, and it changed the way that I lead in my business. It changed the way that I lead in my family. It really made me a more effective leader all around.
That's pretty cool. Well, I will have a little more information about Sealfit Kokoro in the action plan for the listener if you're curious to check it out. And again, you can just check out the episode number 45 with Mark Devine. He talks a little bit about that as well. So Tom, what kind of habits do you have? And maybe it's fitness, or maybe it's architecting discomfort into your day, but what kind of habits do you have that you feel have helped you be successful? Things that have helped you separate from what you might have been otherwise?
There's no question that fitness is a habit that I have developed pretty much before I have an 18-year-old son, and I can remember that about a year before he was born, I decided that if I was going to be a dad, I was going to be in really good shape, and I had put so much focus on my business and trying to live this dream of being a fishing guide that I was really basically completely neglecting my physical body. I wasn't watching what I was eating. I wasn't getting any exercise beyond being out there, pushing the boat around all day. And I started to pay for it. And I turned it all around, and I started exercising as a daily habit, at least 30 minutes a day. That's how it started. And then it spiraled into some kind of craziness that is Sealfit or whatever. But there's zero question that having fitness as a priority and as a parent of three, fitness had to come at a time when it was not family time. Like I used to try to get my workout in just whenever. And what would happen is I'd get back from work and there'd be wrestling practice or the soccer practice or play practice or some kind of dinner with friends or something. And you would miss that day, and then you would miss the next day, and then you'd get back on your workout. And so I decided a long time ago that, my fitness was going to be my priority, because if I couldn't take care of myself and I wasn't healthy myself, then how could I lead my family? How could I be there for my family if I wasn't physically, healthy and strong myself? So I decided that, the mornings were going to be my time. And I used to leave the dock at 5:00 in the morning, but I would get up before that and work out, because I felt like that was my responsibility to make sure that I had a healthy body. And that has become something that I'm very firm about. I exercise every morning, and generally I'll start out with some breathing exercises. This Wim Hof, which, if you don't know what that is, Wim Hof is an individual that's fascinating. I encourage you to look into it. I would not have enough information or time to explain thoroughly what it is, but it's a breathing. He has a breathing technique that allows you to do all kinds of things with your physiology. You'll have to look into it, and hopefully maybe you could have him on your podcast. He's a very interesting person. But
we'll have that again for the listener. If you go to jimharshawjr.com/action, I'll put that in the action plan as well.
Right. So I do this breathing technique in the morning just to kind of clear my mind and get focused. And then I do a workout with my friends, and we end it a lot of times with this gratitude practice, where we just kind of ground ourselves and be very thankful for the things that we have, including our health and our families and everything. And then we get up and hit it hard every single day, whatever that means to each of us in business, and show up the next morning. So that as my practice has been extremely helpful and definitely has a lot to do with my success.
Yeah, very cool. Well, so what about for the listener? They like to get an action item out of this. What can they do in the next, let's say, 24 to 48 hours? What action can they take to help them move towards their goals, help them move towards living a better life and getting more out of their own life?
I would say attack your weaknesses. Identify your weaknesses, and then make those weaknesses your strength.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that too.
It's really that simple, I think.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of philosophy out there. It's like, don't worry about your weaknesses, focus on your strengths. And I'm not a believer personally in that. I think you got to, like you said, attack your weaknesses. For me, public speaking was a weakness. I ended up doing a TED Talk. It was a talk that's really spun into a lot of different opportunities for me. But it's, when you're a wrestler, or an athlete, because I've had a lot of different athletes on here. I've had lacrosse athletes and football players, et cetera, et cetera. And as an athlete, we just know that we have to work on our weaknesses. Certainly, we got to focus on our strengths and take advantage of our strengths. Mm-hmm. But if we have weaknesses, then we've got to plug those gaps. Otherwise, we're never going to achieve the level of success that we want to achieve. And you have any book recommendations? I mean, what kind of, any books that you've read or resources, maybe it's another podcast, et cetera, that you might recommend for the listener?
Yeah. Recently, within the last few months, I read a book called Extreme Ownership. Jocko Willink. Yeah. He was a Navy SEAL, and I love that book. I love that book, whether you're a parent or, a business leader. The applications for that book into your everyday life are fantastic. And then I've gone on to listen to his podcast, and I really enjoy his podcast. Everything he's putting out. Big fan of Jocko Willink and Extreme Ownership.
Yeah, he's a guy. I'd actually like to get him on the podcast here one of these days. So yeah, Jocko Willink. I will have a link to that book in the action plan for the listener. And Tom, I appreciate you coming on the show. Tell the listener where we can find you, follow you, watch your TV shows, etc.
Sure. Love to talk with anyone. We are very active on social media. We have 3 television shows. One is called Saltwater Experience. And you can find that on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I think it is saltwater_EXP or saltwater experience, or if you just search saltwater experience. That's the one that I'm on and the most active on. We also have one called Into the Blue and another one called Sweetwater on all those same platforms. I have a training blog, Tom Rowland Training, and, I'm very easy to find. So if anybody wants to talk further about any of these things, I'm happy to try to help any way I can.
Cool, and I will have links to all that good stuff in the action plan as well. Tom, thanks so much for making time to come on the show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
And for the listener, if you get value out of these episodes, the best way to say thank you or the best way to keep these shows coming is to go to iTunes and offer a rating and a review. If you do that, that's basically how iTunes ranks their podcasts in their search results. So if you want Wrestling with Success to show up a little bit higher like I do, post a rating and review on iTunes for me if you could. And until next time, just like when you were an athlete, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success. Wrestling with Success is a member of the Athlete on Fire podcast network. Check out all of our shows at athleteonfire.com/podcasts.